night shift at a small hotel on the Atlantic coast in the middle of winter, the time of year when the town is almost empty of tourists. Hotel du Farol had been standing here for over a century. Its cream-colored walls were blotched with salt stains, and the wooden window frames had been painted over so many times they were cracked like dry skin. In summer, the place was alive, bars open until late, music spilling into the cobblestone streets. But in winter, the streets were silent, the ocean black like a sheet of glass. The only sounds the clatter of shutters and the wind threading through narrow alleys. Teresa, the owner, hired me because few people could stand the oppressive quiet of the night shift. I'd never been able to sleep well at night anyway, so I took the job. The reception desk was an old oak table with a small oil lamp for atmosphere, as she called it. Behind me hung the brass room keys, and in the drawer sat the leather-bound guest register Teresa insisted on keeping, even though we had a computer now. My first shift began like any other winter night. Wind hissing against the window glass, the tang of salt in the air mingling with the lemon scent of floor cleaner. The lobby clock ticked audibly. At 2 a.m., the door chime rang softly. The glass door opened, and a man stepped inside. His long, dark wool coat was soaked to the hem, his soft-brimmed hat shadowing half his face. When he removed his gloves, his hands were pale, almost translucent, and so cold that when he handed me the money, my skin prickled as if dunked in ice water. He paid in cash, a few damp euro notes, and when I asked for a name for the register, he wrote slowly, just 2 slanted letters in blue ink, smudged and blurred from moisture. He requested a room on the 3rd floor at the end of the hall. I handed him the key to room 312. He took it without touching my hand and turned away. I watched the hallway camera feed. He walked the length of the 3rd floor, his shadow stretching under flickering lights, then vanished from frame. The door to 312 never opened. At 227, a sound came from above. Drag, stop, drag, stop, slow, deliberate, heavy. I went upstairs. The 3rd floor felt colder, the carpet giving off a faint mustiness of fabric that hadn't seen sun in years. Room 312's door was shut, the handle freezing under my palm, the lock still latched from the inside. Suddenly, from the far end of the hall, came another dragging sound. I swung my flashlight. Nothing. The next morning, 312 looked untouched, the bed perfectly made, but the old wooden floor held a faint wet trail from the window to the door. The window was locked, its inner frame crusted with salt. I opened the register. The line with the 2 initials was blank. The second night, he came again. Same words, same damp cash, same smell of salt, same request for 312. The camera never caught him entering the room. At 2:27, the dragging resumed. I didn't go upstairs this time, just sat and listened. The oil lamp on the desk quivered, as if someone had walked by. The register's name column for that night was empty. Curious, I asked Teresa for an old register. The one from 1978 had several winter pages, with short 2-letter names in blue ink, slanted right, alongside notes, 3rd floor, end of hall. Some pages had the name space empty, but faint oval ink stains, identical to the one I'd just seen in the current book. On the 3rd night, he arrived again. This time, I asked nothing. The key to 312 felt colder than before. At 2:27, the dragon was louder, followed by a heavy thud. From the lobby window, I saw the lighthouse sweep its beam across the water and reflect a shadow standing directly behind me. I didn't turn around. That morning, Teresa called me to 312. On the table by the window lay a scrap of paper with 2 slanted letters in fresh blue ink. She told me quietly, that winter he stayed 3 nights. On the last night, he went out the window. On the 4th night, the wind was still. No door chime. I thought he wasn't coming. Until I heard dragging, this time right behind the desk. A faint wet trail curved from the entrance to the key cabinet. I opened it. The 312 key was gone. A soft metallic tap on the desk, and there it was. Cold. The brass tag sharp with the scent of salt. I set the current register beside the 1978 one, opened to the matching date, placed a blue ink pen between them. At 3:03, the door chime rang once. I looked directly at the empty namespace. If you need to write, write. No wind. A single drop of icy water hit my wrist. The pen trembled, then etched 2 letters before the ink blurred into an oval stain. I counted silently to 17. The dragging retreated, out the door, fading into the smell of sea air. In the morning, Teresa saw the registers open. She kept the pen and rested her warm hand over mine for a long moment. A few days later, a young couple booked a double. I checked the cabinet. 312 was still there. That night, no dragging, only the sound of their suitcase wheels rolling softly over the carpet. I thought maybe the loop had broken. But on my last night, handing the keys to the day clerk, I stepped outside into the cold street. A taxi pulled up. A man got out, his shoes wet, his dark wool coat hem dripping, soft-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He passed me without looking and said just loud enough, "3rd floor, end of the hall." I bought the music box in Vienna on a rainy afternoon. The shop owner said only one short sentence: "If you buy it, don't open it at night." He spoke so seriously that I laughed out of awkwardness. I paid, put it in my backpack. When I touched it, the wood felt colder than the air. On my first night at the hotel, I placed it on the table by the window. Small room, white walls, yellow lamp, the smell of old paint mixed with damp wool from my coat. I lifted the lid. Inside was a small gear mechanism and a tiny bronze ballerina fixed to a spindle. I gave it a gentle wind. The music came out faint and broken, like someone practicing a song they hadn't yet memorized. A short phrase, a stutter, then the same part again. Between the notes, there was something else, very faint, like a breath brushing my ear. I leaned closer, but the sound vanished. When I looked up, the lamp flickered ever so slightly. The next morning, I flew home with the box. Since then, every night when I passed my desk, I felt the urge to open it. The second time I did, as the music played, the room's scent changed. Sweet, powdery, nothing like anything I owned. The melody was still incomplete, but I could hear a short syllable repeated in time with the gears. I didn't understand the language. I guessed it was German. I shut the lid immediately, the tips of my fingers tingling as if I'd touched frozen metal. On the 3rd night, I opened it after midnight. Music played. In the wardrobe mirror's reflection behind me, a narrow patch of white swept by, as if someone had turned slightly. I turned around. The room was empty. On the wooden floor, under the lamp's light, was a circular patch in the dust, exactly the size of a ballet shoe's heel. I began experimenting. Opening it before midnight, nothing happened. After midnight, the melody was broken, the powdery scent returned, and there was always some small extra detail. The curtain would sway though the window was shut, the lamp would flicker once, or the wood would give a faint creak under the desk. Each was small enough for me to dismiss. But whenever I closed the lid, my hand stayed cold for seconds afterward. I searched briefly online. A few old articles mentioned a ballerina who had lived in Vienna and vanished before a performance in the 1920s. One line mentioned an unfinished song. I stopped there. I didn't want to feed my own fear. On the 7th night, at exactly 12:03 a.m., I opened it. The room was dark, except for the desk lamp. The old melody began, but the gears turned more smoothly, as if someone had just oiled them. The scent of powder grew stronger, with a faint note of damp fabric and varnish. From inside the box, a woman's voice whispered right into my ear. Just one word. Komm. I don't speak German, but I knew the meaning. Come. The air in the room dropped a degree colder. In the mirror's reflection, a figure in a white dress stood with her back to me, shoulders moving slightly with the rhythm. I blinked. The figure didn't vanish. She only paused for a beat, as if listening to whether I would step closer. I reached out and closed the lid. The music stopped. The mirror returned only the empty room. After that, I tried to avoid opening it. For 2 nights, I left it in a drawer. At midnight, I still woke to faint music, as if coming through thick fabric. I turned on the light. The box was still in the drawer, lid closed. When I slid the drawer open, the scent of powder burst out, as if it had never left the room. I brought the box to work, leaving it on my desk to prove to myself that nothing happened during the day. True enough, in daylight, it was just an attractive antique. No scent, no voice, no breath. In the evening, I wrapped it tightly and put it away. At night, I still heard it. Not music, but the faint turning of gears mixed with the sound of someone counting time. I became obsessed with one question. If the song ever finished, what would happen? One rainy night, I decided to find out. I set my phone to record video, placed a clock in front of me, and opened the lid at exactly 00. The melody began haltingly. I wound it further, the gears tightening, the music lengthening, less breathless. Powder and varnish scents thickened, sweet at first, then sharp like freshly opened glue. The desk lamp threw a yellow halo. The mirror's edges blurred like mist. The whisper came again, right at my ear. Not a single word this time, but a short sentence, though I only caught the first. Come, before the rest dissolved into the music. In the mirror, the white dress wasn't turning anymore. She stood still, head tilted. I noticed something small. At her right hand, the outline rose and fell with breathing, very faint, very steady. I remembered the shop owner's words, "Don't open it at night." And I understood why it hadn't been a joke. I reached for the lid. The moment my fingers touched it, pain shot through my hand from the cold, like plunging into ice water. The melody stumbled, then continued, smoother than before. In the mirror, the figure took one step forward, enough for me to see the lace at the hem tremble slightly. I shut the lid. The music stopped entirely, the room falling into perfect silence. The figure vanished. I taped the lid shut, hid the key to the cabinet elsewhere, forcing myself not to try again. The next night, I still woke to the scent of powder, but there was no music. For the first time in days, I slept through until morning. When I woke, there was a tiny, black heel pin lying on the table. I don't own heels. It was worn flat on one side. I picked it up. It was warm, as if it had just fallen from someone's pocket. I set it beside the box without touching the tape. On the 10th day, I brought it to a nearby clock repair shop, asking if they could examine the mechanism. The old repairman shook his head. "This can't be opened without breaking the wood." I asked, "What if I break it?" He shrugged. "Then all you'll have is the shell." I took it home. That night, no sound, no scent. I slept soundly. I woke to the scent of powder directly beside my face. When I opened my eyes, dawn hadn't fully broken. The box was still on the table, tape intact, but the lid was slightly ajar, just enough to see a thin black gap, as if something inside had pushed from within. The gap was so small I had to tilt my head to notice. Inside was darkness. No sound. I touched it. The tape was unbroken, but the lid had a faint spring tension, like a latch being held shut. I pulled my hand back. Near the hinge in the wood was a fresh scratch, fine and straight, the way a fingernail might dig in. I never opened it again. I wrapped it, mailed it back to Vienna using the address from the receipt. A week later, the parcel returned, postmarked Empfänger unbekannt, recipient unknown. I locked the box in the deepest cupboard and left the key elsewhere. That night, no music, no scent. I slept well. The next morning, on the carpet in front of the cupboard were two small round marks, the size of fingertips, spaced evenly like the steps of someone pivoting on a heel. I didn't bend down to touch them. I just stood there for a long time, listening to my heartbeat match the spacing between the marks. Tonight, I won't open the box. I won't touch it. Won't listen. Won't look. I've moved the chair away from the desk, left only the ceiling light on. I want it to understand I'm no longer curious. But before I go to bed, I still pass by the box, glance at the dark wood, the ballerina carved into the lid, and think of something so simple it's almost absurd. If an unfinished song is ever played to the end, where will the one waiting for it go? That question is as light as dust, but it clings stubbornly to the tongue. I turn off the light. In the dark, there's no music, only a dry, faint sound, like a heel pin rolling across wood, stopping exactly at the edge of the desk. I don't turn on the light. I count silently to 17, and as I count, I realize the room has changed scent again. No powder now, but fresh varnish, the smell of a stage just scrubbed clean, and a pocket of cold air holding the shape of someone, waiting for their cue to begin. I arrived in Luxor in October, when the heat still clung to the stones, and the sunlight brushed against your skin like a fine layer of powder. I had accepted an invitation from an international archaeology team I'd worked with on a photo project in Jordan the year before. They needed a photographer to document the opening of a newly discovered chamber beneath the temple, one that appeared on no existing maps or archaeological records. Their email was short, with a few black and white shots, taken through a narrow crack between blocks. Darkness so dense, it looked solid, and the edges of the crack worn smooth, as if too many hands had touched them, from the inside. I kept reading it over, not sure if it was professional curiosity, or the strange prickling in my fingertips, a tingling that made me want to reach into places I knew I shouldn't, that made me say yes. From the car window, Luxor unfolded like an old film frame, the slow black green of the Nile, rows of palms bowing in the wind, and far off, stone columns rising as if planted to defy time itself. On the road in, my driver had the radio on low, the Arabic announcer's voice smooth as silk. The closer we got to the temple grounds, the more the air changed, the smell of hot dust mixed with incense and a faint metallic tang, like sun-baked brass. I met the team in a white canvas tent, the air inside stirred weakly by a rattling fan. On the table lay a large site map, fresh pencil lines sketched over faded blue ink from the 1960s. The lead archaeologist, a French woman in her 40s named Marion, spoke in a raspy, deliberate English. We open the slab tomorrow. Today is just light survey and equipment layout. Photograph everything, marks, positions, and faces. Beside her stood Abdel Rahman, an Egyptian who had worked here for over 30 years, his hands darkened by sun and dust, nails rimmed with black from the stone, and a worn leather strap always around his wrist. I shook hands, accepted a badge, and was handed a sheet of rules. Don't touch anything not instructed. Don't be alone in the new chamber. Don't stay underground past 6 p.m. And if you hear any rhythmic noises, report immediately to the lead. The passage to the chamber was a narrow corridor between two walls. The ceiling partially collapsed. The blocking slab and its surrounding stones had only just been exposed after days of clearing debris. On its face were shallow, uneven grooves, neither decorative nor in standard hieroglyphs. "It's not a warning," Marion said as I brought my lens closer. "It's more like counting, or keeping tally." Abdul stood back, his hand resting on the leather strap at his wrist, eyes fixed on the surface. I saw small scratch marks in horizontal rows, 3 strokes, then a gap, 3 strokes, then a gap, like a crude signal from someone without proper tools. That evening in the tent, we reviewed the day's shots. In one frame, light angled across the slab, and at the very edge, where shadow thickened, there was a dense patch shaped vaguely like a person pressed against the wall. I'd seen Len's ghost in before, but this shadow didn't drag with the light. It felt rooted. I said nothing. The mint tea on the table had gone cold, giving off the faint, sharp scent of crushed leaves. That first night in the hotel, I slept badly, sweat cooling sticky on my neck, despite the air conditioning's hum. Around 2 a.m., I woke to knocking somewhere in the building. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, 10 seconds apart, then silence, then 3 more. Same rhythm. I opened the timer app on my phone, and, like some foolish game to push the fear away, counted along. After 6 sets, it stopped. I lay there listening to the air conditioner and thought of the marks on the slab, small strokes like dots in a pattern, and strangely it calmed me. Something about it felt like a number falling into place. The day we opened the slab, a simple steel lifting frame was set to hold it, in case the whole wall shifted. As it moved, a rush of cold air hit us. Not the cool of shade, but the cold of a sealed stone room. In that cold was the damp smell of something long trapped, and the metallic tang of rust. I raised my camera, the team's flashlights cutting into the space. Suddenly all the sound seemed to narrow. The echo of footsteps softened to a padded hush. The rustle of fabric dulled as if from far away. Marion led in, I followed close, my beam sweeping over carvings unlike anything I'd seen. Figures both human and animal reduced to suggestion, heads elongated, eyes carved as deep empty pits, arms as single lines. The low ceiling forced us to hunch. At its highest point, a black stain like smoke, veined faintly across the stone. "Lamp soot?" someone whispered. Abdel shook his head, gaze fixed on a section of markings. At the far end sat a black stone chest, its surface gleaming like volcanic glass. Lid sealed with resin aged into a horn-black crust. In the seam were a few fibers of cloth, like remnants of bindings. A metal probe tapped the seal with a brittle sound. Marion decided it wouldn't be open that day. They needed further checks. As we left, I photographed everything: walls, ceiling, floor, the chest. In one corner, as a flashlight beam swept past, something like mist rose briefly from the floor. A thin strip of light. Then gone. That night, in the temporary darkroom tent, the chemicals gave off their sour bite as wind rattled the canvas. The images came up slowly: walls, carvings, the chest. In one shot, the lid's smooth surface held an oval smudge, like a face pressed to black glass. I blinked, lifted it closer to the lamp. The mark merged into the stone. Behind me, someone coughed. Amir, a young Jordanian archaeologist with unruly hair and a half smile, even when talking about bones. "I swear I age 10 years every time I step in there," he said, half joking, half serious. "The walls feel like they're seeing through me." I laughed, the cold sweat at my nape finally drying. The day the chest was opened, the heat outside was like a sheet of metal. Corners of the resin were chiseled away, the smell of burnt sap, lime, and stone dust mixing in the air. When the lid shifted, the room inhaled sharply, or exhaled for the first time in millennia. Inside was no gold, no charms, only a black stone statue standing upright in an empty cavity, waist high, wearing what looked like a pharaoh's crown, but with a face perfectly smooth, like polished whetstone. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Its hands rested lightly before it, fingers closed, palms facing each other as if holding something unseen. I lifted the camera, the lens cooling under my grip, and as I pressed the shutter, a faint vibration traveled through it, like a hand laid on my shoulder. I lowered the camera. No one was near me. That evening, the statue's image emerged sharp and unsettling. On his smooth face, something reflected. Not light, not the chest's edge, but a faint oval with the blurred contours of a face. No clear gender, just the line of a jaw, the bridge of a nose. In the next angle, the same oval was tilted slightly, as if listening. In the last shot, the contours were more familiar. Amir's half smile, the faint scar at his brow. I set the print down, pulse drumming in my throat. The next morning, Amir was found dead in the chamber. No marks, just lying on his back, eyes wide open as if someone had called his name exactly once. A thin white film covered his pupils. They carried him up, called the doctor, the tourism police, the ministry's representative. The early report said sudden cardiac arrest. Those who prefer easy truths nodded. I stood at the edge of the crowd, camera in hand but unable to lift it. The wind through the passage sounded like bone scraping bone. The project was halted that day. Marion's voice was rougher in the short meeting. Pack up, seal the chamber, await orders. I gathered rolls of film, drives, lenses. On the ride back, the driver switched off the radio, as if the city itself wanted silence. That night, the knocking returned, clear enough I didn't need to count. 3 knocks, 10 seconds of silence, 3 knocks again, 6 times in all. I wrote it down in my notebook. 3 vertical line, gap, 3 vertical line, gap, over and over. Before leaving Luxor, I asked Marion for one last chance to shoot the chamber empty. She hesitated, measuring whether it was courage or stubbornness. then nodded. The seal tape was cut. The door unlocked. Dust rose like water as the door swung in. I stood at the threshold, not stepping inside. Through the viewfinder, the room seemed to have stretched slightly, each stone breathing deeper. The chest was there, lid back in place, the statue gone. I lowered the camera, looked around. Nothing had changed. I raised it again, and through the lens the statue stood there, hands before it, smooth face catching an oval shadow. I closed my eyes, opened them. The viewfinder showed only the empty chest. I took one frame. Empty. Another. Empty. A third. And there it was again, a dark blur by the chest's edge, waist high. I put the camera away, the stone under my feet cool as water. Back home, I did what people do to flush something from their mind. Buried myself in other projects, shot rainy streets, shuttered shops, faces thinned by winter. But at night, alone at the glow of my monitor, I'd hear the 3 knocks, 10 seconds apart, 6 times somewhere behind the wall, or in the pipes, or under the floor. Sometimes my screen would dim slightly, as if someone stood behind me. On my desk, amid cards and cables, I'd find a fine dust shifted into 2 parallel lines, a handspan apart, like the marks 2 stone palms might leave if they set down something unseen. I began to dream. In the dream, I walked a low stone corridor, not Luxor, but a composite of places I'd photographed. The low ceiling of the temple, the smooth walls of a museum, the flagstone floors of a European church. At the end was a door carved with the same tally. 3 marks, a gap. 3 marks, a gap. I touched it, and immediately the knocking started. 3 knocks, 10 seconds of silence, 3 knocks, as if someone on the other side had placed their hand exactly where mine was. The smell of metal, of stone dust, and a familiar sting. Fabrics scorched lightly by the Luxor sun. One winter night I woke from a dream too sharp to dismiss. The corridor, the carved door, the knocking. This time in the dream, I pressed my ear to the wood and heard not voices, but stone shifting. I woke to the smell of stone dust, the kind only desert air carries, thousands of miles from where I was. I opened my apartment door and stepped into the hallway. At the junction of 2 white-painted walls, the floor was cold as a single slab. The space was silent. I stood listening, counting to 10. Nothing. I turned back, shut my door, and heard right behind me 3 knocks. Not loud, but too close. I didn't turn. I counted slowly to 17, focusing on my heartbeat to keep from losing the count. At 17, the air at my back cooled a degree, then warmed, as if someone had passed by without touching me. I know some things. If you tell them, people will slot you among the superstitious. I don't call it a curse, because I don't know who cursed whom. I don't call it a ghost, because everything about it is orderly. 3 knocks, 10 seconds, 6 sets, tallies carved like calendars, a statue's smooth face reflecting someone. I only know there is a sequence set a long time ago, and I, through a photograph, a glance, have become a new number in it. Maybe one day, if I go back to Luxor and descend again, I'll find the statue still standing, hands before it, palms cupping something unseen. Maybe that unseen thing is the count itself, or the shadow of the next face, to appear on its surface. Maybe it's nothing, just stone. But tonight, in my warm room, in a cold city, I still hear it. Very faint, very steady, as if from within the walls. 3 knocks, 10 seconds, 6 sets. I don't count along anymore. I let it count me. and in the silence between each set, there's a moment where I catch the smell of fresh varnish on wood, burning incense, and the rust of a crown worn on a smooth stone face. A face that will never look back at me, but somehow knows exactly where I am and how many beats are left before that door, the one carved with marks in no known script, is opened from my side.